is no different than it would be on any other bridge. It's snow removal. There's no removal. It's going to cost $20,000.
Better keep going back again.
Pardon?
I think they're all waiting here now.
All right, you can go ahead. All right, welcome back, everyone. We will reconvene this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council. And the next item on the agenda, under reports from staff and administrative officers, is the 2021 budget and levy presentation. We will call on our City Finance Director, Bill Sommer. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, and good evening, Council. Always good to be to this point of the year when we're getting the budget put together for next year. A lot of work has gone into this budget. We started this process back in May with the Tax Levy Committee. It's just a reminder, your Tax Levy Committee is our Mayor, Mayor Ben Shire, Councilmember Anthony Hicks, and our Administrator Andrew Bremseth. So we thank you guys for all your hard work putting this budget together. And much of what is in this presentation tonight we did look at in September, but with some changes and some promises fulfilled that the Tax Levy Committee said we'd get that levy to be a zero change from 2020 to 2021. So that's what we'll see. So, Guy, if you want to flip to the first slide, because I can't move the slides on this presentation now, so you'll hear me say that now and then tonight. But just the calendar, we're here at the end of the process, December 7th. I'm going to go through the presentation, then we'll give the public a chance to have any comments if they have. That's part of state law. We just open that up. It's not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting to take comments. And then once the City Council has approved the budget and the levy, we certify that levy to Otter Tail County by the end of the year. And then they, of course, get that rolling for the bills that would go out in 2021. So next slide. So looking at some of our budget assumptions for the year, several of these are the same as what we looked at in September. However, the health insurance, at that time we were at 12%, came down to 9.5%. So that certainly helped. We were able to cut some costs there. Our electric, city, natural gas, you see those percentages there. Now the insurances, I'm going to jump to the bottom of this one, workers' comp. In September, we had estimated 7% across the board for that. You now see 35% for police and 4.5% for all other city employees. That 35% is a result of PTSD claims in police departments across our state. So we're seeing significant costs for PTSD related to that, and that's what's driving those premiums. I get these numbers from the League of Minnesota Cities, so that's how I find out my information and incorporated that in the budget. Now the liability, property, and auto should be less than what you see on the screen. We'll find out as we get that renewal done, but it's looking to be hopeful it'll be down a little bit, and we can always address that if it's significant. We can do some reallocations of that later. One other note I'd like to just kind of, so you as a city council know kind of how we start this process with the tax levy committee. We don't just look at the 2020 budget and adjust budget for budget. We go back and we look at what individual departments' needs are, what is their spending history, and what are specific plans for 2021. So really that budget is tailored every year to what the needs are of those departments and what the needs of the public are. So next.
And they have to justify.
Oh, and they have to justify all those needs. It's not just a given. It is a long process that we go through, working through this with the tax levy committee. But we do, those department heads have to show us why those budgets are needed. Okay, the next slide in front of you gives you a budget overview. Total proposed revenues, $41,339,462. Total proposed expenditures, $39,811,502. That's one of the numbers for the resolutions we'll be asking for approval. That's the total expenditure budget for the city. The levy, 2021 proposed levy of $6,604,784. That is no change from 2020. So when we were here in September, we had come in with a levy increase of $181,000, a little over that, or 2.75%, with the promise that that would be zero by tonight. So here it is zero No change from 2020, just what you as a city council wanted to see. And then with the tax capacity rates, you can see the 2020 rate there of 58.915, and then the 2021 estimate of 55.883, or a 5.15% decrease. We'll talk about it later too. If everything stayed the same, property taxes would go down for that. But you will see as market values across the city change as well too. So if you're seeing an increase in your market value, your taxes could still go up a bit, even though our tax rate is going down. But one other thing is when we have new construction coming in the city, new homes being built, that helps to offset any changes in that tax rate. It's more of the pie. You can spread the levy out. You're sharing that with over more residents and more value. So that helps bring taxes down. It gets to be a complicated formula, and if residents wanted to look at their individual tax statements and how that will change, that's something we really talk with Otter Tail County about on an individual basis. We're here tonight to talk on the broad spectrum of it. So that's what our tax rate there, looking at that 5.15% estimated decrease. So the next slide shows you the entire budget broke down by fund type. You can see our general fund has a balanced budget there. That's our general operating fund of the city. That's where the majority of operations for governmental type of activities take place. All your street maintenance, snow removal is in there, park and rec programs, community development, police, fire department, all that fits within that general fund. And then special revenue funds have specific revenue sources that support those. Main one in there is the public library and the Port Authority fall within special revenue funds. Debt service funds, that's where we make our bond payments, make those annual debt payments. Something to note, since September, we had that refinancing of 6 different bond issues that closed, and we are going to save about $568,000 over the remaining life of those bonds. So that falls within the debt service category. Capital projects, that's where we build the projects, and we'll have a slide on that that says what's in that individual number. Enterprise funds, those are our liquor store, refuse fund, water, sewer, stormwater. Those are run more like a private business where the users consume that product and then pay the fee for that. And internal service, the various departments of the city are the customers of that fund. So that's our fleet of vehicles that serves the city. So that's just kind of a broad spectrum of the budget. Next slide shows a pie chart of the revenues of what are our sources of revenue? You can see it's not all just property taxes. Property taxes make up 16% of the entire city budget. Intergovernmental, another 16%. That's local government aid. City of Fergus Falls, we're pretty reliant on that in our general fund. Charges and sales. So the biggest part of the budget is actually funded through those enterprise funds and liquor store sales. So this is your water fees, your sewer charges, refuse fees. And then we have some various other smaller ones as well, and we'll talk about some of those in detail later. You'll notice the transfers of 7%. Those are transfers between funds. So capital projects move money over to debt service to make those bond payments, as an example. So the next slide shows the expenditures, where the funds go. You can see about 30% of our city expenditures are for wages and benefits. I know I say this year after year, but we're an organization of people that provide services. So our people that's a big part of the budget. Liquor store inventory, again, running those operations. Capital outlay being a large one as well too, doing those projects. So just pointing out for you the various areas of where the funds go for the city. So this just, next slide just recaps that levy, showing no change. So again, we'll be asking you to approve the levy of $6,604,784. Wanted to point out again, the tax levy committee had the goal of 0%, and we're there tonight. This next slide just kind of shows how that tax process works. So Otter Tail County Assessor first determines the market value of your individual home or property, business, whatever parcel it may be. The property class rates, they're established by the state of Minnesota. And then those class rates are applied to that market value determined by the assessor to come up with what your tax capacity is. And that's what we use to actually calculate the tax bill ultimately. Then you as a city council, you establish the property tax levy, and you see that amount there at that 6.6 million. We set that on a flat dollar amount. So we, as a city council, come up with that. We give that to Otter Tail County, and they spread that across the parcels. Now, some people may say, oh, you're just increasing my market value, so you're raising my taxes. It is based on what we actually levy, that $6,604,000. So the city chooses that flat dollar amount that we're going to go get. And it's all these other factors that make it a little bit confusing on individual tax statements. But so there's that levy. Then that's divided by that tax capacity to come up with your tax rate. Use that tax rate, to calculate your individual tax bill for what's owed then. So the next one just shows a little bit of trend on the property tax levies and the rates. You can see from 18, 19, and 20, we did see some increases in our levy as well as the tax rate. The tax rate hasn't gone up quite as fast as the levy because of new construction that's been added to the city has helped offset that. But now you see that levy being held steady from 20 to 21, no increase there. And then actually the tax rate therefore decreasing. And I get that tax rate estimate right through Otter Tail County. We work in conjunction with them to come up with that estimate. So that just shows where our trend was, and the impact now we're estimating for next year is actually a decrease in that rate. The next slide shows a little bit of trend analysis in tax rates for across the jurisdictions. So you look at the top line, which just those tax rates we're talking about. We also point out the annexation area of Woodland Heights because that was a phase in over 6 years, and now in 2021 we're in year 4 of that. So the Woodland Heights residents now will be paying 2/3 of what the full tax rate is for the city. And you can see what these estimates happens here. So for a $125,000 house in 2020 would have been $583, going down to $553. Now that's if the market value stays the same. You'd actually see a tax decrease. Same for a business from $5,450 down to $5,169. And again, then you have to take into considerations on individual scenarios where those market values go. Just a little bit trend analysis for you so you can see how we shake out across all jurisdictions. So 2020, all jurisdictions at a tax rate of 124.032, going down to 117.111 on that for the total city tax rate. The next slide shows us our local government aid. We have been certified to receive a bit more in LGA in 2021. You'll see the red bar on this chart, 2021A. This is where the Tax Levy Committee came up with an estimate that we would potentially see a decrease in local government aid of 20%. And that would be about a $790,000 decrease in local government aid. That is still built into the budget this way. Now, when we originally started building this, we had an estimated deficit in the 2022-23 biennium of $4.6 billion. Now, last week, the November forecast came out, and we have seen improvement across the state. That is very good news. For the current biennium, we will look to have a small surplus, is what they're estimating. And then instead of that $4.6 billion deficit, it'll be a 1.2, 1.3 right in there, billion dollar deficit. Still a deficit. We still have a risk of losing local government aid. Hopefully not as much as we put in here. We'll look at some of what's in here for this 790, but I'll just briefly touch on if we don't get cut as much. So then we have more revenue than we were thinking. We won't have to use our savings account, basically, our fund balance. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in another slide, but that's what would happen, I would foresee. Because we have built in here to use $300,000 of fund balance, transfer additional $200,000 from the liquor store. basically pulling from our savings for these one-year adjustments in LGA. If it's not that bad, then we don't use as much of our savings account. So good, that would be a very good scenario for us. Okay, the next slide shows general property tax levy going up $8,767. This is the general fund. This is one fund out of the city. With all changes in those other funds, it comes out to a zero change in the levy. But we wanted to touch on just a little bit in the general fund here. There's that 790 decrease in local government aid that we built in the budget. We wanted to be conservative and kind of brace ourselves, you know, for the worst case scenario. That's why we put that in. The city will also be receiving a $600,000 LCCMR grant, go towards the dairy purchase. We'll get that property transaction closed with the Port Authority in 2021, and then we'll get that $600,000 grant and also use $400,000 cash to match that grant. So the next slide shows more about our general fund and the use of our fund balance. Right now we have a use of $1,262,000. Part of this is that fire truck. We bonded for it in 2020. The fire truck is completed, awaiting inspection. We'll get delivery early in 2021. So those bond proceeds came in 2020 and they'll go out in 2021. So they'll flow through the fund balance is why that gets to be a use in fund balance. We're also using $125,000 of accumulated capital outlay towards fire truck purchase. And then the dairy property, those matching funds I mentioned, there's the $300,000 I mentioned of rainy day funds. And then we already talked about the $200,000 from the liquor store as well. You can see bracing for those LGA cuts, using some one-time revenue to bridge a gap, and hopefully we won't have to use so much of those. And when that all comes, we'll come back to the council and go through that in detail when we learn more on LGA. Next slide, just pointing out in our general government, we are cutting budgets throughout the city. Our departments were very good to work with that during 2020, bracing for these deficits, as well as reducing them across departments wherever we could in 2021 to be as fiscally conservative as we could. Next slide is public safety. We talked about that fire truck that we'll be getting shortly. We're using a cash payment. We bonded for part of it, and then we'll be making annual payments that'll have a levy anywhere from $40,000 to $59,000 for 9 years to pay for that. But certainly, a good investment. The previous truck is from 1987. It's been taken care of very well, but it's actually over its useful life. So I know the fire department is excited to get that new truck, and that's good for our community as well. The next slide regarding streets and highways, wanted to point out we're not increasing our funding in streets this year, but we are maintaining it. We didn't cut anything in our mill and overlay project, so we still have $374,400 to do our annual maintenance projects. The next slide is for Park and Recreation. Just recently, been working with the fundraisers for a dog park, and they have come up with just about $8,000. The city can fund the remaining $6,500 out of our annual parks capital outlay, so that project will get done in 2021. So looking forward to that. I know the people are looking forward to that as well. We did pull back a bit on our tree trimming from 180 down to 155, but noting that we did double that budget in 17 to 18, so that's why the tax levy committee felt we could pull back 1 year, try to bring some of that back then the next year. Economic development, we're maintaining our statutory maximum funding for Greater Fergus Falls at $50,000. We have a new tax abatement levy going on for $40,000 for the North Star Behavioral Health. That's done in conjunction with Otter Tail County, and that will be a 10-year tax abatement. So that's what's happening in economic development. We also have the Port Authority and did decrease the levy from $75,000 down to $60,000 for 2021. Again, just in anticipation of these LGA losses. The dairy demolition and cleanup should be completed. We'll get that transaction done. Just pointing out, the Port Authority does own the Community Behavioral Health Hospital, And then we lease that to the state of Minnesota. That's been able to keep those mental health services here in Fergus Falls. At one time, they were originally located at the Regional Treatment Center. So what a great example of how the Port Authority can work to provide these facilities and keep the jobs and the services in town. The same thing for that building at 1814 North 1st Avenue with Lakes Country Service Co-op for that level 4 education facility. So just kind of a good reminder of what the Port Authority is involved in. And again, those leases for those facilities fully cover the cost. The Port Authority just was the conduit that made that happen. So that's great. Next slide is our public library. And they have a budget of $901,950. Majority of that funded by property taxes. That's $778,060. And then regional library aid comes in at just about $90,000 as well. So we have a great facility over there, and our staff, they did a great job with this 2020 and COVID and serving the public. And they did their part too in pulling back on expenses too. I know Gail kind of put the brakes on some spending where she could, and yet providing that great service to the city. And the next slide is for the Bigwood Event Center. Now that was constructed in 2000, opened in 2001. We've been in operation for 20 years. Our contract for the management of that is ending now in April. So we have in the budget just some funds to kind of keep the facility heated. It'll probably be a dark facility for the remainder of 2021 after April, as we kind of hopefully start coming out of the COVID-19 impacts on meetings and conferences. We put in here that we would transfer funds from the liquor store to cover those basic utilities, some staff time to maintain the facility, so that we could preserve the cash balance that we have on hand for that facility for capital repairs of $228,400. We'll certainly be coming back to you more in 2021 and talking about the future of that facility and how hopefully we can come back to having in-person meetings and conferences. Capital improvements, some of what is proposed in capital outlay. As you council members all know, whenever we do projects, we come before you with individual bids, how the project is going to go. So these are high-level estimates that were even now done a few months ago. So, but we come back to you, you know, for each project as they come forward. We'll also get going on our capital improvement plan again now in 2021. Get that rolling again. That is just a plan that, you know, is used, I guess, for just planning purposes. It helps us as a city council plan out those projects, but each one of those projects comes back before you for analysis, you know, an individual approval. But this just gives you some detail of what we're looking at. And then we're into the enterprise funds. So our liquor store, maintaining good profitability. Our manager, Brandon Curry, does just a great job managing the facility. You can see we're estimating operating income of $751,000. Again, we're taking some big transfers out of this in 2021 to about $827,000 of transfers coming out. Again, 200, maybe 250 more than usual. And then we'll see how LGA goes with that. So the tax levy committee, so on the remainder of these enterprise funds, didn't want to really touch utility rates this year. Really hold back on those because of the financial situation for all our residents dealing with the pandemic and all the closures that have taken place. So that was really the goal. So we did not, we're not increasing utility rates except for one rate, and we'll get to that on the refuse slide. So the next slide here, if Guy wants to flip, is the refuse fund. We're showing operating income throughout all years, and then for 2021 as well. If we go to the next slide, this is the one rate. We'll have a resolution at the end of the meeting here tonight. So it's our disposal rate. City of Fergus Falls collects the garbage, disposes of the garbage with Ottertail County. So we are going to receive an increase estimated at 5.2% on our disposal rate. And we're going to turn around then. We need to increase the fee on the utility bill, we're estimating 4% for that, effective January of 2021. Again, going from $7.25 a month up to $7.54, or a 29-cent increase. That is the only utility rate that we want to change for 2021. The next slide is for the Sewer Enterprise Fund. Again, you'll see maintaining profitability across that fund. Same with water on the next slide. You can see those operating incomes staying healthy, as well as stormwater when we get to the next one. Again, no changes in any of those rates. And then we have our equipment fund. That's our internal fleet of vehicles. And we didn't change rates there also. We kept them stable. Didn't increase the rates to the other departments of the city. So the last slide is just where we are tonight. I'm presenting this for this public meeting. And then December 28th, we will need to have this certified to Otter Tail County, the final levy, upon your approval. So with that, that's all I have to say, and then we can open for questions.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you to Anthony and to Andrew for your work on this. I just had one question. I know Jim's got one, then we'll open up to questions before we open up to the public. Just to clarify, Bill, the $790,000 that we're anticipating we could lose in LGA funding this year, if we, which we hope we will be, not lose that much money.
Correct.
You have projected coming out of rainy day funds and also additional transfers from the liquor store.
Correct.
We're not going to spend that money if we get it from LJ. That would just go to not take the rainy day funds or not take the transfers from the liquor store,
Yep.
correct?
We would not be taking out of our savings account, because of course you can't live on a savings account. That was thought of doing just a one-year bridge.
Sure.
So if we collect more LGA than we're anticipating in this budget, yeah, then we don't have to drain those as much.
Thank you, Jim. I'm sorry, thank you, Bill. Go ahead, Jim.
The tax statement that we just got from the county.
Yes.
Does that is the rate we were at in September, not the new rate, is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. So that
Okay,
had a
so
levy
people-
increase. Yep.
People should look at that and say that what they're seeing for city increase is not going to be what it's going to be.
Right.
Good point. Very good point.
Yep, thank you I was going to point that out, and I neglected to do that. So, yep, for those of you watching at home, yeah, back in September, we had a levy that was $181,000 higher than we are bringing tonight. So that's what's on the tax statements. It was a 2.75% increase. Now here tonight, we're coming with a no increase. So yes, the taxes will be lower than what's on those proposed statements.
Thank you, Jim. Any other council members have questions for Bill before we open up to the public?
Ben, I think it would be fair to say, as you say, that we basically
Is
looked,
someone on there?
Anthony trying to talk.
Oh,
we looked hard at the budget, and I think, we've done a good job of coming in at zero. So, the goal, hopefully, as Bill said, is to not have to dip into it.
Say, Anthony, we can't hear you. If,
I said I think it's be fair to say that we've basically done a good job of coming in at zero, and the goal is equally not to dip into rainy day funds or transfers from the liquor store. Those are dollars that hopefully can go towards other city projects that enhance the city rather than sustain it.
yeah, thank you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Justin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what you had said. I had the privilege to sit on the tax levy last year, and it's challenging each year sitting on that to kind of be stewards of our resources, and especially in light of everything that happened this year, I'm sure it was very challenging. So thank you to the folks on that committee for your time and effort to net effect get us to a net zero. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Any other council comments or questions? See none, let's go ahead and open up for public comment before we call for any resolutions. So at this time, anyone from the public wishing to make any comments, please identify yourself with your name and address, and then go ahead and make your comments. So we'll open it up now. Please identify yourself.
Good evening. This is Mark Layton, Fergus Falls, Minnesota. I think a great deal of congratulations to the council and the finance committee on this leveled budget. I would hope now next year you look for a reduction in spending and a reduction in real estate costs levies against the community. My one question is on the enterprises, where do those profits go in regards to, let's say, water and sewer?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Mark. Bill, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, thanks. That is a good question. And yeah, those profits stay within those funds. So let's say the funds we collect for the sewer fund, those sewer charges on your bill, those by statute and by our city code need to stay in that sewer fund. So we use those for capital repairs and maintenance, so things out at the sewer plant, as well as the sewer lines. So when we have to replace or repair sewer lines, that's what those funds are used for, as well as the ongoing maintenance. So when we transfer money out of those enterprise funds, they are for justifiable costs, like their computer costs that directly relate to the sewer plant come out of there. So we can't transfer those funds out for things that are not related to that sewer enterprise, for example, or water or stormwater. So yep, they stay in there for operation, maintenance, and then capital repairs and replacement.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions or comments from the public before we call for a resolution?
I'm Mark Layton again. Let's just look at the water and sewer again. What type of budget, I'm sorry, what kind of balance do you have in those accounts for future capital expenditures? Is there some way to read that number?
Probably not in the budget document that is here. That would look more at like what's our cash balance in there and the net retained earnings. But speaking off the top of my head, our sewer fund, we have, I believe, a little over $10 million in that one. And that would, again, make sense because just a couple years ago, our sewer plant was fully depreciated, so you kind of hit your highest level there. The water fund is, we're maybe down at $4.5 million of cash in that fund. And that is why we have been pushing the water fund. So it looks like we have more profitability there, but we're pushing that because our cash balances aren't as high. Our water plant is older, from the 60s. However, it has been well maintained, and we continue to each year do some major improvements out there. So I am very confident in our water staff out at the plant. But that's why we push those rates. We've been aggressive with those rates the last probably 3-4 years, but it's because of those long-term capital replacements that we're preparing for, so that, it's easier to do a 10% increase for a couple years in a row than to defer all that and then come in a year you redo the plant and have to do a 80% or a 90% increase. We don't want to avoid that. We want to kind of avoid the peaks and valleys and do kind of a steady as our goal on that.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions from
Mark Layton again, in that budget, you got depreciation, so those non-cash expenditures are adding to the, if you will, the cash position of that fund.
That's correct. So for instance, if in the water fund, if we depreciate $500,000, but then out at the water plant, we do, I'm going to look to Guy Taylor, the big filter area, is that the...
Rehab a basin.
The basin, yep, rehab a basin. So, yep, depreciation is covering the current year's wear and tear on that facility. And then, of course, we use that, plus any profit, to redo a basin or redo some of these major pumps. So, yep, we definitely include depreciation in all of those funds. I'm a strong advocate of including that in our rates so that we fund depreciation.
Well, I think that's wise. I guess the final point I'm getting to, and thank you for the council's time, is that, as I talk to more of an elderly couple or widow, $20 here, $20 here, $20 here, added to all the utilities that person may have, including insurance and real estate taxes, becomes a burden. So when I heard that the council was holding utilities bills flat, I think that's great. But a challenge for the council next year would be to lower those numbers, assuming you've got adequate reserves and can cut the utility costs to the community.
Thanks for those comments, Mark.
Yep. And just to follow up on that, to give you some piece, we do 10-year projections on those rates every year. We kind of continually doing a rolling what's coming, because for instance, when we have to rehab a water tower, that's $1.2 million, and we want to be prepared for that. So we are studying those every year, and you know, we want to be conservative and keep them to a minimum, but we also want to be realistic about what those need to be. So.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Layton. And with that, if there's no more public comments, we would look for a resolution from the council adopting the 2021 levy as presented this evening.
Ben, I'll make that resolution, but I also just want to make a comment. People are starting to, obviously, as Jim said, receive a proposed tax statement, and despite kind of everything, I've had a couple of residents call me because they've seen quite a dramatic increase in the value of their property and a decrease in their homestead amount. And you know, I would ask that people kind of stay steady, because obviously once all the certifications are done, there'll be a new statement come out, and on that statement will be a process by which they can appeal to the county about obviously valuations. So if you have seen a dramatic increase in the value of your property or an increase in your property tax rate, just hang in there and then wait for the next statement to come through and follow the process of the appeal on that.
Thank you, Anthony. And we did have a second on that as well from Jim. Any other comments or question from the council before we call for that vote? Roll call, please.
Kwame,
Yes.
Roofer,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Arneson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Fish,
Yes.
Hagberg,
Yes.
That resolution is approved. We also need a resolution adopting the 2021 budget as presented this evening. So would someone like to offer that resolution?
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Krista.
I'll second.
Thank you, Caroline. Roll call, please.
Kwame,
Yes.
Roofer,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Arneson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Fish,
Yes.
Hagberg,
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Finally, this evening, we need a resolution approving the 2021 refuse rates, which were presented this evening, which held steady with the exception of a 4% pass-through increase in the refuse collection.
Disposal.
Disposal, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Roofer. Thank you, Caroline. Roll call, please.
Kwame,
Yes.
Roofer,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Arneson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks, Hicks,
Yes.
Fish,
Yes.
Hagberg,
Yes.
That resolution is approved. There is no old or unfinished business this evening?
That rate increase.
just did it.
Yeah, we did that.
We did?
Yep, we got that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. No old or unfinished business, no new business. The only announcement that I have is just want to make everyone aware of the Hoot Lake Solar Project public meeting that will take place tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. on Zoom. The link to that Zoom meeting is on the city website. So please, we encourage, it will not be a public hearing for the council, but we do encourage the council to participate and just listen to the comments that come forward after the release of the EAW, so they're informed when the action does come back to the council. So with that, next council member is December 21st, and we are adjourned.